You're almost to the weekend, guys. Come on in, join us. It's Nik and Brit with the Cluster Puck podcast. I'm trying to brainstorm new ways to do the intro, and that one didn't feel as good as I thought.
Hello, everybody.
That kind of dragged a little bit. So let's rewind it and try again. Hey, everybody, come on in. Welcome to the Cluster Puck podcast, part of the MHRT network here at Center Ice. I am Nik. Beside me here is Brit. How's it going, Brit?
It's going. It's my last weekend of coaching. We're in Des Moines, Iowa, and then we are done for the summer.
Done.
Oh, nice. Ready for a break.
I believe it. You deserve one. You deserve a lot of breaks in your life, Brit. How's
it going there?
What's that?
How's it going there?
It's raining.
Other than double the stress with two teams now that you've got Utah and
please.
You get two times the.
I get to just watch hockey more often in person. That's kind of really it. The loyalty still sticks. Don't you worry. But no, other than that, it's just a lot of rain and snow at the weirdest time. So
we just got that too. It rained and then it blizzarded.
Yep,
because that's the correct term, right?
Something like that. You know, we're not English. So anything sounds, if it's remotely close, it's good enough. Okay, well, there is a lot on today's plate.
And it's definitely not even close to being all of it. So it's not done.
That's exactly right. So we're going to try and cover the important stuff and then see what happens from there. But before we get started, don't forget, everyone, to like and subscribe, follow the MHRT network so you can get notified when shows like the Cluster Puck podcast go live. Excuse me. You may do so on the various social media platforms of your choosing. And if you want to follow us, we ask that you do so at the Cluster Puck podcast on Facebook and at Cluster Puck Avs on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. All right, Britt. So we got games to cover. A trade has happened. The trade deadline is looming. We'll talk about kind of predictions, things that the Avs may need to do or not do. And then we got some upcoming games that we're going to try and dissect as well. So let's I think everyone knows that the trade had happened, but we will dive into those details in a second. Let's get the two past games this week out of the way, and then we'll focus kind of on the meat and potatoes of today's podcast. So two games is all we're covering. The Avalanche won both against the Wild and against the Penguins, one of them in more dominant fashion than the other. But let's talk about this Wild game first. So it happened last Friday, and the Avalanche beat their division, the next guy up in the divisional standings, the Minnesota Wild, by a score of 5-2. This game, it just felt like the Avs were really firing on all cylinders. I mean, there wasn't really. I mean, obviously, first period shaky. I understand. Third or second periods were really when the gear started to roll. But it never felt like they were out of it, despite a 2-1 deficit at the end of the first frame. What do you think?
No, I mean, much of it thanks to our backup goaltender playing phenomenally. I mean, it's kind of a new experience where you don't feel like they have to get out there and score at least 4 goals in order to just hang. So yeah, I mean, they were never chasing the game.
Mm-hmm. And it was very nice. Now, a couple of things to that, though. This one kind of became, I don't want to necessarily say the Ross Colton show, but he did have the most presence, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
Apart from Val Nichushkin, who obviously being back in the lineup, don't realize, again, we've said this about 1,000 times, you don't realize how much of an impact player he is until he's gone and comes back. Just the night and day difference.
He is absolutely necessary for this team's success. I mean, we've won 8 of the 9 since he's been back, 8 of the 9 games since he's been back, or something like that. The statistics regarding the our ability to win games with him on the roster and not is honestly shocking.
Yeah. It's I guess kind of going back to the off ice antics. I have kind of taken a deep breath from that now. I am at a point where I'm hopeful that that does not happen again. In fact, I am more confident that that stuff won't happen again. So I'm hoping this is kind of the vow that we continue to have through the postseason, everything like that. Because again, then that Winnipeg series, oh, she dropped. In that Winnipeg series, he had, I think, 7 goals in those 6 games. Like, he was crucial, and I can't emphasize this enough, how important he was during that time. And again, to see him come back is phenomenal. And then in this game, gets a power play goal. Everything's kind of starting to look the right way. The big kicker, though, I think, again, is Ross Colton. Obviously gets the first star of the night, has 2 goals. One of them's an empty netter. But I noticed that he was kind of everywhere. He was where he needed to be at all times, you know? So, I mean, give props to him. Everything was great about that game.
That pass to Middlestat, oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
Otherworldly. Such a beautiful pass.
It really was.
Maybe even more important than Nuke being back and being productive is the effect that it's having on Middlestat. Middlestat is seemingly a serviceable second line center while Nichushkin is on the ice, which is really nice to see because it was kind of a concern that Middlestat would struggle to play with him in kind of when Nuke first came back. It seemed like Middlestat was struggling to vibe with him in maybe kind of like a not a power struggle, but like a seniority struggle or something like that. And they turned that around so fast. I mean, Nichushkin has literally kept Middlestat afloat.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's kind of talk about that now. So Wild game now in the past, you look forward to the surprisingly not nationally televised game between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Colorado Avalanche. This is one where you do hope, kind of like with what you said, Middlestat had a just tough angle shot on the power play. Great for him,
Yeah.
But you're starting again. The hope is that that is a tone changer for Middlestat because again, that's only his 11th goal.
Which it feels like
for
we
a
do that, what,
2C
every
feels like
3 weeks?
that should
It's
be
like,
like
okay,
at
this is where
least
we turn.
yeah, that should be at least his 20th, And there's a couple of times where he's had, shots ring off the iron. I understand that. But
it's been a struggle the entire year, short of the first 5 games.
Yeah, his presence has been, I guess, lackluster. This game, it wasn't.
And it wouldn't be so stark if a big part of the problem weren't his willingness to move his feet. And that's a recurring Bednar comment, is that he's just not moving his feet. He's not being quick and proactive. And that's option. That's not a talent thing. That's an option thing, which I'm a firm believer in. Other than the infamous line A shift, or was it Pierre-Luc Dubois shift, that was like the trade me now shift. There's not a moment on the ice where they're not giving their everything, but something's not activating with him every second that he's on the ice.
Yeah, because we saw a better part of that last season when we acquired him, because we were looking, we're like, oh my gosh, this guy's got it all.
Right.
And that's the thing, and I guess that's the frustrating thing, is that we know he's capable of much greater play, but for some reason he just hasn't found that same groove this season.
And the best play we've seen has been in the playoffs, and that's the hardest time to do it. So it's like,
he knows how to dig deep, but it's like, just start digging now. Like what?
Yeah,
you don't have to wait. There's no need to wait. But yeah, in this Pittsburgh game, obviously 4-1 win. The game itself didn't feel like a 4-1 win. It felt like it should have been just like a 1-0 win. Because
that's definitely not. The game is not reflective, or the score is not reflective of the game. It felt like a 2-1 win.
Yeah,
without being tied 1-1 until the last minute.
And I think that's right. I don't want to say like this is, the Avs stole a win. They didn't deserve to win. They both were playing really sloppily. right? So I don't want to say they
It
stole
was
a win, but at the same
the
time,
best
I
term
don't
I
want to
heard was
say
it was total pond hockey, which
it kind of felt
honestly
like
is
that.
something that we've struggled to just get sloppy and make it happen at
Yeah,
times.
and you got to win
So
those
it's not
dirty,
even
those
necessarily a bad
grimy
thing.
games.
Yeah. And
But
so it's nice to see them just find a way to win, even if it's kind of sloppy and if the backup goalie has to stand on his whole entire head, no matter how tall he is. Like, because sometimes
stopping
a
32 of
team needs their
33.
goalie to do it. Yeah,
Yeah, it was that one. That one is what I will give to Wedgwood. I mean, that I saw
absolutely.
this one coming a mile away because you could hear just Moj and Riker, excuse me, just getting more and more excited for every great save, which apparently all but two of them were great saves,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Well, and
that's a good problem to have now because he hadn't played for how many games did they say? Like 22
5 weeks. He's played
games?
one game in the last 5
Something
weeks.
like that. Yeah, like
It's
crazy.
reminiscent of Francouz. I mean, you can trust him. It's truly not something that even in a playoff series, if you have to lean on him for a limited amount of time, is overly concerning. I don't think I would want to go through a whole uh, playoff run with him, but the energy he brings, like in the interviews after the game, and just the way that he
Very
is so
personable.
clearly able to see what his role is, and he does it so masterfully in just it. I always think about backup goalies in the NHL, the most competitive dudes in the world. These are the goalies that have been stealing games and on the top of the world since they were children. And then their backup goalie in the NHL, there has to be so much tension in some of those, even if it's silent tension, but it's so visible that Wedgwood is such a team guy and he is cheering just as hard for the team and his goalie mate, his goalie tandem partner, whatever you want to call
Mhm.
it, whether he's on the bench or his partner's on the bench. And that's really hard to find because as much as we love Francouz, he was not nearly such a loud advocate for positivity and
Yeah,
team stuff.
yeah.
So I think that I don't think that this team is as good as we were when we won the cup. And I think that there's a pretty big gap in the two teams, but you could consider the goaltending we had as relatively mediocre. And I feel like we might be able to close that gap in the team's ability by having a goalie that can steal games a
Yeah,
little more frequently or just let in one less goal. You know what I mean?
yeah,
I feel like that might end up being the whole entire difference as to whether if we're successful, it's going to be because the goalie closed the gap.
yeah. And I think a big part of that, kind of like with what you said, is it's always the comparable to the 22 team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the 22 team had two perfectly serviceable goaltenders. Obviously, one was a backup, a designated backup,
Yeah.
but never played as if they deserved more, right? Speaking of
Right.
Francouz, right? He knew
Right.
exactly what he had to do, but that didn't stop him from playing great anytime they put him in, right?
Yeah.
Additionally, though, and you said kind of like, spots to fill and stuff like that. Let's transition now to new spots we're filling.
Hi.
So the so over the course between the two games, the Avalanche made a trade with the New York Rangers. We
Mm-hmm.
sent to them Calvin DeHaan and Juuso Parssinen, a couple of picks, and we received Ryan Lindgren and Jimmy Vesey. I think there was Hank Kampf was part of that as well, but I think he's
Yeah, it was just his
UDC or
rights. He's
something
not
like
even
that.
signed.
Yeah,
So,
I think he's a UDC. But the big two names obviously being Lindgren and Jimmy Vesey.
mhm.
Go figure. It's my team with my wife's team. That always
I
seems to
was
be
gonna
the
say, is
MO with
Allie
this
here to give
thing.
us the lowdown?
She
Because he's
wanted
been
to
the
get
whipping boy for several years.
she wanted to get rid of Lindgren
I can, yeah,
just because he always was injured, first of all, and the second is just kind of he was starting to feel like a sore thumb on the team.
he needed a change of scenery
He
because
needed to change his
sometimes
scenery, and
guys really do.
yeah, and I think at this point it was kind of our thing with Calvin DeHaan, where he wasn't like terrible, but he certainly was
It
not
didn't fit.
noticeable. He didn't fit,
Yeah.
and I know that's not. I don't want to slight the guy or anything. He did
And it's unfortunate
Okay.
because he is a beloved, personality,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he does bring kind of that Darren Helm presence,
Yeah. Yeah.
but he simply did not work in our
Yep.
system,
It just
and
didn't feel right. Yep.
yeah, and the Rangers need those good vibes more than us, I think.
Exactly. And so in a discussion with Chris McFarland, it was brought out that they wanted to Lindgren was the piece they wanted.
Mhm.
And my
And it sounds
understanding
like
of
this
it,
has been a long time going,
I
like
think so.
years.
Like from my understanding is that they wanted someone with grit, right? They wanted
And
someone that could replace a Manson style, oomph when he's not playing because
yeah,
he's always injured, right? Someone that so basically someone that if they need to have that offensive capability, they can. They're just going to be that kind of not take crap from anyone, rough and tumble
he is one of
guy
those guys that has towed the line of being dirty. I don't know if you recall the
quite a
check
few
that he
times.
laid on Donskoy, and he ended up
Yep,
fighting Kadri over that. But
yep,
he's one of those guys that has towed the line of being rough and straight up dirty. And as much as I want to get a lot of that dirty stuff out of the game, there is value in having a guy on the ice that make
there's an
people
enforcer.
make bad decisions and also question what they're going to do. And
Yep,
there's value in that because you might get that dirty hit. And I don't believe he's really done anything in the last few
not
years awful,
noticeable.
but
No,
people are aware, you know what I mean? And it's going to
yeah,
make people a little bit more hesitant in the corners.
yeah.
There's value in that.
Kind of the McDermott, just without the size or the height,
Yeah.
I guess I should say. But no, and that's the thing that I did notice anytime, because obviously I've watched my fair share of Rangers games too, right? I noticed that whenever
Mhm.
Lindgren was in any kind of scuffle, he knew how to draw people into getting penalties, the opposing
He's
teams into getting penalties. Now, it wasn't like a magic
yeah.
button where it's like every single time, but just in those key moments where he would, he's getting a hooking or a trip or whatever, he somehow knows how to just push the right buttons to get
Mhm.
them to have a roughing call. So you even the playing
Yeah.
field, those key times that I noticed. So I honestly think it's a good trade. Because Dahan,
I do
not
too.
very, not very noticeable. Lindgren, he's
I like
noticeable in
Passanen,
one way,
Parsonen,
right?
excuse me, but in the big picture, disposable as like that is the most inhumane way to word
Right.
that, but he is not someone that we can be attached to when he really hasn't been loud since he got here. I
He had a
and he
couple of
might
goals,
have a more
yeah,
successful career with the Rangers should they find
yeah,
a position for him, but
and yeah, Jimmy
none of
VC,
it hurts,
yeah,
like especially particularly.
yeah, and with Jimmy VC, obviously we healthy scratched him the one game against, that we actually had them. But
Yeah.
I'm wondering if at what point he's going to replace someone like Parker Kelly or something like
Mhm.
that, because Kelly he's fine on the ice. He doesn't do anything wrong, but
He's
Jimmy
off and
VC
on, but
also has the production to back him up as a
yeah,
fourth liner, right? So it's not like crazy numbers, but it is
right.
enough, right?
And it's
So at
just
some
depth.
point,
We need to have people not in the lineup because eventually
exactly.
they're going to be in the lineup.
Nope,
So
that's exactly right. So ultimately, I'm happy with this trade. I know
I'm too. Yeah.
uh, it's no like
To me, it feels like an
emotional.
ideal one of our little projects.
Yeah,
And Lindgren has been saddled up with Fox for years at this point. Hasn't he expected to play top line minutes
yep,
playing against the number one,
yep,
you know,
yep,
players against every other team? And we're bringing him in and we're just asking him to be serviceable and not a liability with
yeah,
maybe just the occasional added production would be cool if you could
yeah.
get a point here and there.
And I think I'm hoping that's the case where obviously he's
Yeah.
he's very good defensively still, but he still can provide offense, kind of similar to like how Josh Manson is, that kind of thing where he'll get in a fight, he'll hit you hard, whatever, but then just randomly he'll do this 200-foot coast to coast and almost
Yeah.
pot one pass. It's like, Where did that come from? Like crazy. But that's the trade. Again, no emotional damage in this one, like the Mikko Rantanen one. I'm still probably never going to get over that, but here we are. And you kind of just move on with 2 new pieces, see how they fit and how long it can carry you. Okay.
And Lindgren's a penalty killer too. So that's
that is also very true.
Any player that you can add to your lineup that is decently able to do like any of the small teams things is good to have, extras of those. Even if you don't utilize them for those positions all the time, knowing that they can and have been them.
Yes, that's exactly right. Okay, so speaking of trades, trade deadline, as this episode is being released, is tomorrow at 1:00 Mountain Time.
Yeah.
And my blood pressure is already through the roof. My anxiety is very high because this is always one where it's always the last, that last morning on Friday where everything happens, right? And I'm just waiting for that ball to drop.
And the Avs have been so active this year. It's not last year. I never at any point felt like something drastic was going to happen. But with the Mikko Rantanen trade, you can't roll anything out. Absolutely anything. And we have at least one very clear need left, and we also have, I believe it's about $3.7 million in open cap space. That they're not going to leave that unspent.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the situation. Okay. Your assets that you could currently play around with, right? You have a 2026 and 2027 first round pick. You have a second round pick for this upcoming draft. You have prospects. You have Casey Middlestat, who obviously that's the big name that everyone's talking about. So let's talk about Casey Middlestat first, because obviously picks and assets that can all be arranged elsewhere. Okay, we're talking right now about players. With Middlestat having a couple of goals in the last few games and looks like maybe picking up the tempo, is it kind of writings on the wall? He's out of here.
I go back and forth. Sometimes I talk myself into thinking that they are just like, screw this guy. We are so done with your bullshit. But then other times it's like they really invested hard in him. They signed him right away. They gave him a good contract. And they've been very patient with him. The diminishing minutes and reduced line, responsibilities kind of makes me think that they have started to or are at the end of their rope with him. Couldn't tell you. Literally would not be surprised if they ship him somewhere else. So they could probably just ship him right back to where
Buffalo.
he came from. And
and get Bo Byram back. That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. It wouldn't be the most bizarre trade that's happened.
Probably not, honestly.
6 in-season trades we've had, and I recall last year multiple times complaining about how boring our team was. Our team is no drama, no fuss, and we went full balls to the wall drama this year. So hopefully it's not too crazy.
Well, I was gonna say, Britt, I was gonna stop you and correct you and say, no, we're full of drama. Remember, Seattle hates Cale Makar.
Oh my God. It's mutual.
In the most unjustifiable way where it's like, okay, he didn't hear the whistle. It was an accident. Move on. But
idiots.
That aside,
it just makes them look like the most awful hockey fans.
Kind of a little bit. But we've all been there. We've all had those moments. So my assessment is still this. I still am in the camp that Middlestat has played his last game. Well, probably this upcoming game against Seattle, I think, or San Jose is probably his last game. With the Avalanche. That being said, unless like a hat trick goes down or something crazy where they just pull a 360 or 180, I don't see him staying with the team past the trade deadline. Now, that being said, I do agree with you where if they do keep him, it wouldn't shock me, because maybe there's a chance he does.
It wouldn't.
There's always that chance he gets the uptick, right? Always.
And it may just be a matter of if they find the right deal, great. If they don't, okay. Like they may be satisfied with keeping him, but everything's on the table. If with the right deal comes along, if say, I don't know, a certain veteran center were interested in joining the Avs.
Yep. And that's the next part of this though, is so assume Middlestad's going. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's focus on
Yep.
this 2C. Who do the Avalanche, who would you say ideally they go and get and make a trade happen?
I don't know. My
If you want,
list
I can go first.
has made me, yeah, I'll tell you my list that makes me question if I'm actually insane, and then maybe go into some real ones. But like my genuine wish list is Brad Marchand, Sidney Crosby, and Ryan O'Reilly. So I feel like it is the most unrealistic, but also completely plausible list that would
Yeah.
have been insane last year or 2 years ago, but it doesn't feel insane. Just
Yeah.
dream girly stuff.
Potentially. No, and I know Marchand's name's been spat out there a lot, because again, with that
And then he had to go
Rantanen
get
trade,
hurt.
anything is possible because of that
Absolutely.
Rantanen trade. So you
And
cannot say
Boston
that's
is
unrealistic.
really, yeah,
Yeah.
Boston is preparing
They're looking for a fire sale.
for, yeah, an actual fire sale, not a
Yeah.
pathetic Pittsburgh fire sale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I two of those I could agree with. One, Britt, I will just say I am rooting for you, but keep dreaming. I really am rooting for you though.
I don't know
If
if
I
you
eat
ever
crow,
listened to
that'd be the
Between the
best crow
Pipes,
I'd
but
ever eat.
oh my God. Raj was yelling that he was like begging people on Twitter before the game to start a huge chant of "We want Crosby"
You
during
want
the game, and
Crosby?
I don't think it happened, but that would
That's
have
good.
been incredible.
It'd been pretty
And you
funny.
just gotta wonder, after the magic of Four Nations and then losing to us, have they beat us in quite a while, other than that one big comeback game? I think was last year or the year before. I mean, we beat them. He knows what's here waiting for him if he were to come, and it's on ice happiness.
Yeah,
I'm losing faith, but fortunately, my questions will be answered in not too long.
that's exactly right.
And I understand. I completely understand the legacy of wanting to be a Penguin your whole life, especially when he's going to be a part owner, and you know what I mean. He's going to do it all
Yeah,
for the rest of his life. But if the stupid fans would urge him to go and Ray bark it up, it would help a lot.
there you go.
But
There you
Boston
go.
is not exactly the most like hospitable, and they're not the sweet types like that.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a few that I was thinking of that could be potential suitors for filling Casey Middlestat's 2C spot, assuming he gets traded. The big one that I know has been spun around a lot is Brock Nelson. Now, last I
Yeah.
saw, it sounds like maybe the Islanders are trying to get something done, but at the same time, in that little
Well, did you
post-game
see
interview of
crying
his,
in the interview? Yeah.
he was tearing up. So maybe he understands his days are limited, and I can totally understand the
Seems
emotion.
like the writing is on the wall. Oh, sweet guy.
Exactly. I totally understand him being emotional. He's played with them his entire career.
But
Like, I
imagine
get
how
it.
emotional he'll be if he can come here and be loved by us, because I feel like the
That's
love
also
that
true.
Colorado loves with versus the Islanders and
Yeah.
the passion and intensity probably be really good for the guy, because the
Yeah.
Islanders are just
So here's my thing with Brock Nelson. First of all, the first thing I would have him do is grow out a beard. But a
dance buddy. Throw in a dip, do whatever you want.
do whatever you want. But the big thing with Brock Nelson, though, is he, despite his appearance of old age, he is still pretty young, right? He still has plenty of tenure that he could still be very serviceable. And right now, he's still scoring goals at a very high clip, right?
Yeah.
And
On a
it's
team that doesn't do a whole lot of scoring.
he's kind of one of their main pipelines for getting that type of production. you know, and he's kind of like Lehkonen in the sense that he's always at the right place at the right time to score a goal, right? And we could use a lot more of that, especially if he's playing with, you know, people like Nichushkin and, you know, things like that, where it's like you could make for a pretty good, you know, lineup there.
And going
So
from Bednar to Patrick Waugh would probably be a nice, you know, nice
yeah,
little vacation for him.
yeah. Um,
The only
so
thing is, though, with Nelson is he is from Minnesota, and apparently he would very much like to play in Minnesota someday, and that's kind of his ultimate desire if he were to have a choice, from what I understand.
yeah, and
So hopefully he
and
doesn't have a choice.
that's also true. So that's kind of one thing. Now the second one, this one is a bit of a stretch, I will say, because he is not a true center.
Go ahead.
Um,
Go.
and that would be Vancouver's Brock Besser.
I mean,
This
is
one,
Vancouver are they burning it down yet, or what are they? God, they are
it
so.
sounds like Pedersen and Besser. I mean, it almost feels like they got one foot out the door. It could not happen. You never know. The reason I picked Besser over Pedersen in this particular case, you know, Pedersen being an actual centerman, is because I feel like Besser has the opportunity to fit better with the team in that his play style can be managed. I don't know if I'm displaying that information correctly, but his play style just feels like
Pedersen is a whiny little bee who would probably hate Nathan McKinnon even more than he
potentially. I
did
mean,
JT
there's
Miller.
the off-ice antics and stuff. Plus, I want Elias Pettersson to go to Utah.
Yeah.
But that's
And I don't want him anywhere near
personality
my
side.
stuff.
That's
I
personality
don't think he's
side.
a winner. I don't think he's a
Well,
winner.
because
That's my
I think he could revitalize himself and kind of rediscover
yeah.
himself
I
in
mean,
Utah.
during
But
the peak of it,
that's
it was discussed that he truly is one of the most incredible, like pure goal scorers in the NHL.
oh
But all
yeah,
I've
and
ever,
he had it going a few years ago. Like it was
yeah,
stupid how much he was scoring, right? He could rediscover himself. He just needs a change of scenery to do it because from his whole debacle with the locker room and JT Miller and whatever else was going on, it kind of tarnished him. So he needs to change of scenery somewhere, right? I'd like for him to rediscover himself on a team that's on the rise, right?
yeah,
So
yeah. I think you made the
Utah
right
fits
choice
that bill.
there.
That's and hence why Brock Besser, though, his play style just happens to fit the Avalanche, in my opinion, a little better. Now, that being said, what would you have to do the second line? Because again, he's a winger. Would that be
Ross
Nichushkin then?
Colton.
Ross Colton maybe takes that over, or you slide Nichushkin over to a center position because he is a bigger dude, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there would have to be some play with that, but I don't think it's an impossible task.
Yeah.
And he still scores. Besser is still, you know, he's 28 years old, right? He still has time. He still scores just fine. That would be my next go-to, but it would require some more moving pieces from the roster side of things.
Yeah.
So again, it could be a big fit. It maybe not. Okay, the next two.
I just gotta move my charger over here, but I'm still with you.
Yeah, you're good.
Knock my
Yeah, go ahead.
computer over.
You go ahead. Okay,
So who's
so
the
the
next?
third. So I guess before I reveal my third pick, I guess, I do like your options of Ryan O'Reilly and Brad Marchand. Again, nothing's impossible. I don't think it's out of the question. Ryan O'Reilly coming back to the Avalanche is more than welcome. Brad Marchand, obviously, you know, that's if it happens, that'd be kind of cool too. You know, he's
Yeah,
still
I
got
feel like
plenty
if
to go.
you're going to sacrifice the positional, like the position that you're looking for, grit is something that we could stand to prioritize over all else. With Josh Manson's off and onness, and granted they addressed that once, but I don't. I think this team could benefit from continuing to add more grit if we're not gonna, if it's someone that isn't a center, I'd like to
Mhm.
find somebody at the top end of the grit elsewhere.
Yeah, that's true. A couple additional just honorable mentions, I guess. I heard Kyle Palmieri's name being spat out. I've heard Jean-Gabriel Pageau's name being spat out. Like a lot of Islanders, which is a little strange. But again, not terrible, right? Not terrible. However, I truly think, I guess for the sake of, if you want a true centerman who can make it work, but this one is kind of the bigger risk of almost being a Casey Middlestat 2.0, and that was his old teammate Dylan Cousins. That's my third pick.
Is he the belle of the ball this year?
Say that again.
Is he the belle of the ball at this point? Or do you think Brock Nelson and then maybe
Cousins? I mean, if I had to pick first, it would be Brock Nelson. But Dylan Cousins could be the move that makes sense as well.
Has there been any verification that he's for sure on the table?
As far as I'm aware, yeah. I mean, a lot of these places that I'm going to, and people saying, hey, where do they think he's going to land? And Dylan Cousins does not stay on Buffalo in a lot of these situations. So, the more I was looking at it, the more I was thinking about it, the more I'm like, he could be that depth piece. Now, here's the hard part about this one, though. As much as, it could all go right and he suddenly just scores like crazy with the Avs and stuff like that, we could run the risk of just having another Casey Middlestat situation where he's all right for the remainder of the season and then just falls flat that first time round. The difference
mentality,
though,
like that kind of loser, hasn't really experienced what it takes to dig in.
Yeah, and it's kind of like an Alex Newhook situation where it's like you gave him the reins and he wasn't able to handle it, right? So, but it's a risk that, again, if it works, it could pay out big dividends. Okay, if it doesn't work, you just get rid of
and
it.
You got to risk it. I mean, that's
and these are the types of risks that you do have to take, right? So again, that one, third one, it's risky. But those are the three that I'm like, these, take a closer look into this and really dissect if it makes sense or not. Again, the biggest one I think that makes sense is Brock Nelson. I think Besser you could make work, no problem, as long as people are all right with shifting around, or Besser just learns to be a center. And then with Cousins, again, it's an experiment that if it goes right, it could go very right. Or if not, you just have another Casey Middlestat situation and nothing has really changed. Which, again, if that's the case, it's not terrible. He's not like out there just being a pylon or anything like that. It's just you just haven't made any progress. So not backward, but not forward type stuff. You know what I mean? Okay. So
it's my
sorry, go ahead.
Can you see me?
I can't see you, but I can hear you. There you are.
There, you should be able to see me now.
There you are. So what about like any additional honorable mentions? Any other people worth noting that aren't the 2C?
To hone in, yeah, one of the names being thrown out there that's kind of feels like he could fit in on any team. Mario Ferraro is one that's been thrown out a lot. He's
name.
Lefty with the Sharks.
Yep.
His contract he is UFA in 2026, so he's got a little bit of term. He's only making like 3.25, so we wouldn't have to do any shenanigans to fit him in there. He kills minutes. Like, he's a minute eater, and it kind of feels like on defense, that's what we could use sometimes. We don't need them necessarily out there like beating the world down, but we just need guys to exist that won't allow a ton of goals while they're out there. Who's my other ones? I had Yanni Gourde on there.
Scratch that off, I guess.
That
okay.
was a lot of stuff.
How about this one? I guess I will reopen the case of the 2C, Ryan Donato. Do you think the Avs could pay the price? Because he's like Brock Nelson, where he is kind of the production guy for his team, and he still has it.
Is the trouble worth disposing of Casey Middlestat on what would be a super incredible contract down the road if he were to find himself?
Yep.
Is it worth the risk there for even the best case scenario play that we would get out of him? Is kind of where I am with a lot of guys for the 2C. It's like Casey Middlestat could probably do just as well, and that whoever that person is could probably suck just as bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's
How
kind of
about a
the
personal one that I'll throw out there? What about Lawson Krause?
ooh, that could be interesting. So here's my thought on
Year.
that. I don't mind that because right now he's playing okay, right? Like he's not playing bad, but he just had he fell off from last year. But if he does go to a team like the Avalanche where they're in the playoffs, he has a role, he knows what he needs to do, he could thrive, right? So Lawson Krause is not a terrible idea, right? But again, it would be
Hypothetically, if we were to not get a center and we kept Middlestat and the cost was Ross Colton, how is someone like is someone like that worth trading for Ross Colton?
it's comparable, the production,
That's the give or take if you bring in
right,
a center versus like a direct replacement for a
right,
Middlestat versus bringing in essentially anything else.
right. It would it be like someone to maybe give Middlestat a run for his money in hopes that his production goes up because he doesn't want to get bumped down again or something like that, or just
Or
additional
just
depth
like
scoring?
bolstering the depth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't. So the comparables are basically dead even with Lawson Krause and Ross Colton. They're scoring at roughly the same things where they have, they have great scoring times and they have great runs with points and assists and goals, but then they have long droughts as well where it's like, boy, you need to crack out of this quickly. So they're pretty comparable in that sense. The big difference though is that Krause has size to go with it, whereas Ross Colton has speed, right? So, and again, Avs are known for their
Is an
speed.
absolute firecracker of a human being. I think that he brings so much joy every single day.
Exactly.
And I will
So,
always preach that that's valuable. I have one
sure.
more that I want to propose to you that
Have at it.
what about Braden Shed? He has not been traded yet, right? Luke did? Has Luke
Luke
been
got
I
traded
keep confusing
today,
them.
just hours
Okay.
ago, I think.
Braden has not. He's a
Braden,
center.
that one, I couldn't really tell you because I haven't paid much attention to Braden Shen at all this year. Yeah, I'm not
He
sure.
is let me see how many points. I'm trying to look up his points. 33 points in 58 games and on pace for a second straight 46-point campaign.
Okay. Yeah, that's all right.
He is 33 and he is signed until 2028 with a $6.5 million cap hit. So that is a little bit high. It might, I don't know if it would necessarily require like getting rid of Miles Wood, you know what I mean? Some kind of cap dump.
Yeah.
But he is him and McKinnon are besties, like they're best buddies.
Despite the fact that McKinnon's teammate a few years ago beat the ever-living snot out of him.
Yeah, but he is the thing about Braden Shen, and I don't even know if he's technically available, but he is a very, very well-respected leader, and I think that would be really valuable because we haven't had a captain or a leader, and I will always go back to my belief that as much as I respect McKinnon, I don't see him as a leader in that kind of way. And we've lost so many really strong leadership voices in the locker room when you think about Cogliano, Eric Johnson, Landeskog, Darren Helm. Braden Shen might be that veteran presence that has seen success and has been in functioning and dysfunctional locker rooms. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. So
Would be a contract that might hurt a little bit at the end because he's going to be his late 30s and still getting 6.5. But we did it with Eric Johnson, so
yeah, that's very true. So yeah, it just seems like there are players and pieces that could fit. And again, maybe it's the one that you don't see coming, which again, that does seem to be the
that's
Avalanche's
exactly
MO,
it.
where
It
instead of
will
going
not
after a
be
2C,
anything
they
that we
go
talk
after
about.
a first line winger or something like that.
Freaking goalie,
Maybe
like who?
maybe we bring Mikko Rantanen back right now.
And that's
But
what I read stuff back and forth that never again, like it's never going to happen. The damage is done, blah, blah, blah. And then I read other stuff that's like he can't exist anywhere else and be him. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. If we were to bring Miko back, though, we would have to eat his full contracts, like his full salary for the year, because you can't be retained when you're taking a player back in the same year, if I recall correctly.
yes, yes. So yeah, that's so okay, okay. Here's the question though. This is kind of side subject about Mikko Rantanen. Can the Avalanche get him back this season, or do they have to wait, or can they acquire? Like, how would that situation work? Again, assuming because we all want him back, right?
Can they
How
just
does that
can't take
happen?
him back with any team retaining contract in that trade, because that could be like a cap manipulation where you trade him to have it retained with the intentions to get him back. Does that make sense? So that
Right.
could be but I believe that we technically could.
Okay.
With imagine.
Would it would have to be in free agency though, because then it would be no strings attached, right?
I think that technically we could get him this season as long as
There's no
the
rule
teams.
that says you can't reacquire the same player you trade during the same season or anything like that.
I believe that the rule was just regarding the retaining salary in the direct trade to us.
Okay.
I
Okay.
might be wrong, but I feel like that's because I did go out and seek that information, and I feel like that's what I remember being the
Interesting.
answer.
Interesting. Okay. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pieces that could happen, a lot of stuff that could happen, I should say. But we will just have to see. And if you really want my truthful guess, it's the Avalanche pull a move that no one saw coming and it somehow works. That's typically what tends to happen. Okay. Um, let's see. Is there anything else as far as
This is what I'm
news?
gonna. Well, technically, it's not against the rules, but the Avalanche re-signing Rantanen after trading him could seem suspicious, and such a move could potentially trigger an investigation into
Aha.
collusion, which makes perfect sense because that's what I was talking about, and that's where the retention issues come. In other words, a team like the Hurricanes would accuse the Avs of setting up a deal in which they would, because they could basically, the Avs could have worked it out with Rantanen also and say, we're going to trade you, you be miserable, and then we'll get you back. And we get to keep Natchez. You know what I mean? So collusion, either team to team or team to player to team.
Right. Because that's what I'm looking at too. So
That they made the deal in good faith, while
yeah,
Rantanen will also need to show how he acted honestly, which I think that it really has all been done in good faith, but it's pretty easy to watch him and see how absolutely miserable, how much he has changed as a player, which he is clicking. It's not, he's had some good games, and it does seem as though he's starting to find his groove there. But will the Avs be able to pay what he wants, even if they were to
that
get him back afterwards?
that's probably the impossible task because
Yeah.
he's going to probably get 14 somewhere, right?
North or Carolina has offered him above Nathan McKinnon money, so I don't know. He might just
Yeah.
also just not want to sign, and even if it was $1 bajillion, you know what I mean? He might just need to see it play out.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so let's kind of move on from this. Oh boy, now I'm going to be super distracted. Just looks like Utah just extended Karel Vejmelka. 5 years, nice. Okay, so that being said, I will not distract myself. I'm going to close my Twitter. Let's talk about upcoming games. So the Avalanche have 4 on the docket for this next week. One of them, of which you'll probably see here in the next few minutes, that's going to be against the Sharks. Then you have to close out the homestand against the Maple Leafs, the Blackhawks, and then at the Minnesota Wild. Okay, so let's talk them game by game here. So against San Jose Sharks. Now, San Jose, they are on a 2-game winning streak, and they just beat Toronto in shootouts under the guise of Alexander Georgiev.
Georgiev led the pack, so he's back, baby.
This may
for the
just
7
be
minutes.
It's going to be the return of Georgiev, I hope. Now, my worry is that it actually is the return of the older Georgiev, where he just lets in the first goal and then just shuts it down from that point on. Now, here's the thing. San Jose, they are so much fun to watch. And especially in a couple of years when they have all clicked and those young guys have aged and got some seasoning on them, they're going to be a dangerous team. They're already so much fun anyways, chemistry-wise.
Yeah.
You throw that on with
So
experience.
much fun.
Yeah. So my key to the game, apart from the assumption that Alexander Georgiev is the one who plays, my key to the game is the third period. So everyone knows San Jose is my little brother team. I love them to pieces. They have the best knack in the world for giving up third period leads. Like if
of children.
If I had $1 for every time that happened this year, I'd have probably $1,000. Like it was just, it's almost not fair.
Just the inexperience. It's a big part of,
from the inexperience.
Shows the youthfulness of the team.
Exactly. So third periods, I think, if the game is close, that third period is where you really need to, take advantage of that, because they will begin to falter off. Now, that being said, they actually came back in a couple of these games, these recent games in the third period. So they are on an uptick. So you got to keep an eye on that, because again, the Avalanche in seasons past have always played down to opponents that are lower than them in the standings. In this case with San Jose, they might play just as bad as them. Right.
So in all the other shitty games that we've lost to crappy teams, these points are critical at this point. Yep. It is no longer a luxury. They are critical.
Yep. These are must-have gimme points, right? Because that's 2 points that Toronto cannot have back now. Those are points that Buffalo cannot have back now, right? They can always go and play
far more important than ours.
Exactly. Right. These points are going to be crucial, especially because you're right there with Minnesota, and you have Vancouver, Calgary, Utah, St. Louis, and Anaheim, believe it or not, all on your tail. Right. Some of them closer than others, but they're all on your tail regardless. Okay. So third periods are going to be key, especially if it's a close game. Now, if it's out of hand, that third period just needs to be cleanup. Right. Don't take your foot off the gas, but just play commonsensical hockey.
Yeah.
Yep. Stuff like that. So that's my key to the game for this game here that you'll watch here shortly. Okay. Next game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, 5:00 p.m. Mountain Time puck drop. This will be on Saturday the 8th. I don't even know, because right now I think Toronto's getting their butts handed to them by Vegas, if I'm not mistaken.
A really weird time, and they kind of are reminiscent of the Avs, that they find ways to lose against bad teams, and they finally have goaltending, but they still have just some bizarre losses. And I think that the Four Nations was kind of jolting for them, to see how inefficient a lot of them were, especially with Austin Matthews being essentially the scapegoat for the entire USA demise with that last play. But they're feeling good. but shaky. Toronto
Yeah.
is never able or capable or allowed to feel comfortable. So we could beat them into the ground just as easy as we could just lose to them.
Yeah. And
But I think we've had a good handle on them.
that is kind of a part of the key to my game here, or my key to the game, I should say, is you're catching them on a downswing, right? If everything goes correctly, which it kind of should, you're catching them on a downswing, right? Kind of similar to how you caught Jersey on a downswing and all these other teams on a downswing. You need to still be able to take that type of anti-momentum that Toronto's got and use it against them. Because right now, like I said, just the end of the second period, and Vegas is destroying them 5-1.
Yeah,
Right?
they are. Holy cow.
And you have very similar, if not better, firepower than Vegas, right? So it shouldn't be that difficult to at least get goals. And then if your defense holds just fine, you're in great shape, right? But again, it's going to take all hands on deck. It's going to need all 60 minutes, the same spiel that I give as far as playing with urgency, all that stuff. But this one, it's just keeping that momentum at bay for Toronto so they're not coming back up or anything like that, because you got a good thing going as far as winnings, or having a winning streak started. It cannot end with Toronto. Again, points matter in these types of games, right? And some of them are going to be harder to come by than others, and these ones you're going to maybe have to fight harder for. So that's my key to the game. Okay, next up, let's see, Monday the 10th, 7 p.m. Mountain Time puck drop, and this is against the Chicago Blackhawks. That'll wrap up a 6-game homestand that the Avalanche will have. And this one, I mean, the Blackhawks are all sorts of, I don't even know what. They will probably have like 70 different teams or players by the time this trade deadline comes around. So it's key to the game. Same thing as San Jose. They are free points effectively. You are better than them in all aspects.
They need to win at least 4 out of 5 in this homestand. And it's not unreasonable to expect it.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. Again, this is a team where it just seems like Connor Bedard is lost out there with no one to help him.
The only defenseman that they had of substance. I mean,
yeah. I did, however, respect the move that Chicago made, trading away Seth Jones for Spencer Knight.
Want to be here, GTFO? And I love Spencer Knight. I think that's exciting. I'm glad for him. I think he's the goalie of the future for them.
And he played a phenomenal game against LA, and he got the first star.
Perfect for everyone.
We watched the third period of that game, and he played great. So maybe that's kind of the new building piece for the rebuild, and maybe Chicago goes and lands some big fish next year, and maybe they're right back in it. But right now, they have an identity crisis. Connor Bedard's not playing like himself last season, and all kinds of problems, right? Take advantage of that, right? They're second to worst in the standings for a reason. They don't have that cohesiveness and that veteran leadership like other teams do, similar to San Jose, right? So same key to the game, taking advantage of third period meltdowns and things like that. Okay. Last game we will cover. So that I should say that the Blackhawks, again, scheduling for the NHL, what a bunch of morons. The Blackhawks game is the first of a back-to-back, but it's not a home and home back-to-back. It's a home and then away back-to-back. So the next game is Tuesday against the Minnesota Wild, 6 p.m. Mountain Time puck drop in Minnesota, obviously. Again, I've stressed this so many times because I feel like we played them about 1 million times in the last 4 weeks. This is the team you have to hurdle to have a more secure spot in the Central Division. Okay,
be that hard.
Out of all of the games that I have stated, the one that I'm okay with dropping is the Toronto game. Okay, because this Wild game is a 4-point swing game. That's my key to the game. There are more points on the line.
There's no excuse. Yeah.
Yep. That's exactly right. 2 points that they can't have that are given then to you. That's like, again, people talk about that
in a positional standing in the conference. Like it's so important.
Yep.
And it feels like we've dropped so many of those games this year that it would be nice to see them start pounding some of those away, winning those divisional games and climbing quickly.
Yeah.
Or at least separating quickly.
Yes. And again, we did just play them last weekend, right? 5-2. We talked about it just at the beginning of this episode. We know how to beat them, and they are playing hurt. They have no Kaprizov. They have no Eriksson Ek. I mean, they still have plenty of good players like Zuccarello, Boldy, all those guys, but it's almost kind of like how when we're missing Nichushkin or Lehkonen or McKinnon or Makar, it's like that for them. You need to take advantage of those type of skill players when they're not there, assuming obviously they're not going to be there for this upcoming game. And again, that's 2 points in your pocket that they gave to you, right? And by that point, it could be that you have leapfrogged them and now you're pulling away chasing Dallas, right? So again, really super important game out of all those games that I've mentioned, these 4 games. That's the one you have to win, followed obviously by the 2 gimmies, and then Toronto, you should. I don't see why you can't. Stuff like that. Okay. Any additional comments for the upcoming games, Britt?
No, I was just going to ask if you had seen Gabe Landeskog had a video crew documenting the last 2 years with like his recovery, and it's going to be a 5-part documentary. It starts Sunday? I'm trying to find the exact date, but I think it's Sunday, and it's going to be on TNT. 5 episodes. I'm insanely curious to see what we learn because it's kind of weird. It feels like Chris McFarland kind of just broke the silence on discussing him again. It felt like they really didn't talk about him for a while there, especially in that off ice, like that ice absence where he started to try practicing with them and then it just feels like he disappeared. So the release of this feels really weird unless it's some like meticulous plan for his like re-emergence back into the NHL. Yeah. I don't know. It seems odd, doesn't it?
Well, and that's kind of the thing was those last few lines, or I guess the whole trailer, I guess as a whole, I should say. I hope it puts those naysayers to bed saying he's done, because clearly he wants to come back. Right? He just,
It's so crazy how people talk about things in such absolutes, like that. Yeah, him not practicing says for a fact, and it's like you have no idea where he is practicing or what he is doing. He might be practicing somewhere else entirely with a full team of people hired to practice with him simply to get away from the noise at the rink and the constant, speculation. People think they're so freaking smart. Mm-hmm. I want nothing more than for him to just come back and but to just come back and even if he doesn't finish out that, even if he were to just finish this year, if he could do a 1 playoff run, be okay and be done, would make me really happy because I just don't handle the shit talking on Gabe Landeskog and what he's capable of doing very well.
Yep, I agree. So again, they said there's still a chance he plays in the playoffs, and maybe that depends on how deep they go or something to that extent. But the fact of the matter remains,
it won't be before because they're spending
fact
his
of the matter
LTIR.
is that regular season, it's out of the question, and honestly can't blame him because that's when stuff really begins to ramp up. And again, the tough part about this was literally this at this point last year, we thought he was going to be back for the beginning of the season and set back once again another season. But here's a reality that I guess even you and I have to face, Britt, is he is pioneering a recovery that no other player has had to do in the league.
Apparently, since he had it done, another player has also had it done in the NHL. I can't even remember who it was, but he's setting a new like educational process in motion for us to do it with more NHL players and do it correctly and like adjust, you know what I mean? They can. I wish that somebody else could have been the guinea pig for that, but
Yep. So we'll just kind of have to see, but that's again the tough part because we're kept so in the dark about it for a lot of these times. And again, he wants to come back. That's painstakingly obvious. But these types of things clearly take time. So we'll just kind of have to keep monitoring it and kind of hope for the best. So, okay, Britt, I think that's going to run us all the way to the ground on this episode. I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to add. Okay, good deal. Well, it could be by the time this episode's even released, a trade has already happened for the Avalanche, and all of this, what we just said, is old news and irrelevant. But by the time we see you guys next week, we may have some new players that we'll talk about and kind of see where the rest of the...
Excited because the teams that you play, like kind of like the new season where everybody's got their free agents and stuff, you kind of get to see new faces of teams.
That's one of the favorite parts about this season is always trade deadline because it's just a storm that Friday morning, and it's amazing and crazy. Okay,
back, baby.
No kidding. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us on this episode of the Cluster Puck Podcast. Again, if you like what you saw, please like and subscribe and follow the MHRT Network so you can get notified when shows like the Cluster Puck Podcast go live. You can also do so on the various social media platforms of your choosing. And if you want to follow us, we ask that you do so at the Cluster Puck Podcast on Facebook and at Cluster Puck Avs on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. With that being said, we got 4 games, 8 points on the line, all of which you should go out and do, right? You should be out there winning. You found a good groove.
If they don't. Yep.
I might join you. I might be right there with you. But other than that, it should be fun. And Avalanche hockey is always fun to watch despite the stress. Because you still, again, cup window, you're still in it.
Yep. Always.
Okay, so go enjoy the game, tonight's game, everyone. Also have a great weekend. And as always, go Avs go.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast's racking up the flame out. So high.